So one of the story on the street is how much pledges or commitments have been made to invest in Nigeria. And this is what the media always report. We got companies, we got countries saying we're going to work with rail, road, power, water, whatever, with Nigeria. And the figure keeps rising in billions of dollars. And Nigerians are asking, show me the money and show us the projects.
I completely agree with Nigerians about show me the money and show us the projects. But we thought the first step at NIPC was to know exactly what the commitments are. We have a newsletter that goes out 6 days a week, and throughout the year 2017, we collected information on all the investment announcements that were made across Nigeria. The totality of that we found came to about 66.36 billion. These are simply investment announcements, not investments. The next phase of the work for us is to then follow those announcements and work with, whether it's the state government, the foreign embassy of the country of the investor, or with the investor directly, to try to take these announcements to actual investment. And we're following them not on an ad hoc basis, but on a deliberate, targeted and proactive basis, so that we can close the gap between announcements that are made. Maybe they have a challenge or two, that with a little bit of support and facilitation, we can help them to go from announcement to actual investment. But we hope in 2018 to follow the 2017 announcements, but to also continue with tracking announcements and working with those announcements to try to take them to investment.
That would be great. One of the issues we're battling also has to do with the pioneer status. Investors want to know if you're giving them a pioneer status in Nigeria. How does it work? Where are we at the moment in terms of what happened during the previous administrations, and where are we at the moment and the way forward on that?
Pioneer status was an administrative suspension for about 2 years. It was lifted last August after the completion of reforms. We've since, prepared a report that relates from 1999 to 2016, all of the approvals that were granted in relation to pioneer status. And we can give you the information by the country of origin of the majority shareholder of the investor, by the number of jobs, that the companies that benefited from it, the number of employees they had, by the value they invested and the like. But that work is still ongoing and needs some validation. But the work that we did last year in relation to pioneer status was essentially to bring the reforms that had started in the previous administration to a close. We are working on gazetting soon the final list of qualifying items for pioneer status. We've taken the list from the short version that existed previously to a standard classification. We used the International Industrial Standard for, we used the International Standard for Industry Classification, the same standard, ISIC, that NBS uses for gathering economic information in Nigeria. So when we publish the revised list, it will be based on ISIC classification, which should help align the work that we're doing, more closely with what NBS is doing. But pioneer status exists, and pioneer status exists for those who benefit and who, based on the law, qualify for it. The law is a 1971 law, and we think that the law, needs some revision, and that work we will also do. We also hope to start in 2018. But more than that, I think the process for pioneer status, it's quite, the expression I like to use is that it's an administrative nightmare. But I say that, looking at it through the eyes of an investor. The fact that the law itself is old doesn't help. But in 2018, one of the things that we plan is a second phase, if you like, of reforms to identify exactly all the steps that are involved in the approval process, to compare those steps with exactly what the law requires, i.e. take it through a process of simplification, if that was possible. And then ultimately, we would like to take the pioneer status approval process online. So it is e-pioneer status rather than, paper as it is. It's a long process now. In totality, it's 18 weeks at NIPC and 7 weeks with the Industrial Inspectorate Department of the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. But at least with the reforms that we've been through, we've brought greater clarity, greater transparency, which I thought would be useful, to assist investors. We also updated the list, which had not been updated since 2006. And we've put in place a mechanism now for that list to be updated every 2 years, for us to look at new industries that need to be added onto the list and industries that should be taken off the list because they have reached a stage where they don't need the pioneer status support. But we provided in the reforms that if an industry is coming off the list, then we give investors 3 years notice of the fact that the industry will be falling off the list. So an announcement made, for instance, in 2017 for an industry falling off the list will only become effective in 2020, 3 years after the announcement was made. But for industries that are being added onto the list, then they will be added immediately. You know, the FEC, the Federal Executive Council, has given the appropriate approvals.
Technically, the last question, Yewande, and it's a very interesting conversation with you. We all go everywhere and say Nigeria is open for business. We say we are open for business. And you, I think you're in a very good position to know whether we are open for business or not. So in your interactions with foreign investors, with ambassadors, head of country delegations and whatever, are we really open for business?
In my view, we're not just open for business, we're actually ready for business. I believe it completely. There's a lot that should have happened in Nigeria in relation to the business environment, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that didn't. You have to ask yourself the question, do you want to be part of the problem or do you want to be part of the solution? And the fact that, some issues were not addressed 5, 10 years ago doesn't mean that we should not address them now. But the reality, if you're addressing them now, is that you cannot build, you cannot plant a seed today and it will become a tree overnight. It's the green shoots that matter, is whether directionally, government is moving in the right direction and doing the things that it needs to do. And I believe in relation to the business environment, which is the first thing that investors consider, when they're looking for a location to do business in. I believe in its entirety, that government is moving in the right direction. Perhaps it's not moving as fast as, people would like. I'm not even sure it is moving as fast as I myself would like. But the reality is that it is moving in the right direction. And it is moving. And I think that's, those are the important pointers that investors look to see.
Yes, very interesting. I don't want to ask any last question. What your speedometer looks like when you're driving. But let's leave that for another day. I want to know at what speed you like driving. 70, 80 kilometers per hour, whatever, depending on the highway and the quality of the roads. Yewande Sadiku, thank you very much for speaking with us, the Chief Executive Officer at Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission.